that welcome. It was lovely to pull up and walk into here today. The last time I was on this campus was for the opening of Weemala, and having seen all of the plans through those quite turbulent years for the centre, it was great to see the building up and open and to walk through it and see the vision realised, and how wonderful to be here in the Clive Austin Centre, a tribute to Clive's stewardship of that time. And I was just saying to Stephen, both the board and management and all of those involved must be very proud to see this centre having come to fruition. And I think it's very well placed to be a very active participant in the next leg of the journey around disability and rehabilitation as the NDIS rolls out in Australia. I'm going to speak hopefully for no more than about 20 minutes. I'm notorious for going over, so I've asked people to keep the clock on me, and that will leave us a good solid hour to take questions from you. I'll cover a little bit of the progress to date with the scheme in the trial sites, some of the work that we've been doing on fixing up the system, building it as we go, making sure that we take advantage of it being a trial to test our assumptions, test our operating model, talk a little bit about the arrangements for the transition to full scheme, which is now very close on the horizon, and then some of the issues that we've identified that need to be managed during that transition period. And I can certainly echo John's words. Probably the person who worries about this scheme equally to me is the Minister, Mitch Fifield, but he's very committed to it. I do say one of the more interesting elements of my job is that I don't just report to one minister. There's actually a COAG Disability Reform Council, and all the states and territories are also joint owners of this scheme, and there was a meeting of that council on Friday, which Minister Fifield chaired, and so I think sometimes when I think my job's hard, I think, well, he's got a pretty tough job too, wrangling all of the states and territories and the Commonwealth. But the one thing that is absolutely the case is the strong support from all sides of politics and from all of the states, territories and the Commonwealth Government, and it's a commitment to realising the promise of the NDIS. So it surprises me when I reflect back that it's only about 20 months ago that she actually started the scheme. You know, it's only been going that long. It just seems years longer than that, to be honest, and it's gone very well to date. Our most recent report, which is available on the agency's website, is through to December. Our report for the period quarter ending March has just been compiled, and that'll be, I'd expect, to be released in the next couple of weeks through that COAG Disability Reform Council. But on the end of December figures, we have around just under 14,000 people in the scheme. It's on time against the bilateral agreements between the Commonwealth and states, which dictate the rate at which people will enter the scheme. We have around about $570 million in committed funds through participants' plans, and that's under budget, which is always very pleasing to me when I'm reporting back to government. And the best metric of all from my point of view is we actually get a third party to survey participants on a very organised basis. 1 week in 4 we survey people on the whole elements of their experience, and we have a either satisfactory or very satisfactory rating from 95% of our clients, and it's backed up by a little bit of hard evidence, which is with those 14,000 or so people there, we've had only 22 appeals through to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. So that tells me we're not only getting it right, but we're communicating well. The reasons for the decisions and the involvement of the person with the disability at the centre of the planning process, which is the one of the big elements of the change of this scheme. But not everything has been smooth sailing. We started in a hell of a rush. It was a very short time between when the legislation was passed through the Commonwealth Parliament in April 2012 and then a commencement, 2013, sorry, and then the commencement on the 1st of July. And to give you an indication, in addition to the legislation, which is broad framework, there are rules that govern how the agency does its work. Made by the Commonwealth Minister, but with the agreement of the other states and territory ministers, and those rules were given to the agency on the 28th of June, which was a Friday, and we opened our doors on the 1st of July on the Monday. So we were short a little bit of guidance, certainly for the first period, and it was not a surprise to me that that first quarter saw us behind time and over budget, and creating a little bit of anxiety and apprehension, including from the agency staff itself, about how it was going to roll out. But we spent a lot of time, put a lot of effort into building the systems to make sure that we get those decisions right. One of the key and critical missing components from the start, and identified by the Productivity Commission as something that the agency would have to build, was an assessment tool. And I have to say that we went through the process, as I always do, of thinking, well, surely someone's got something out there that we can bring in and use. But there wasn't really of any breadth of coverage of all the disabilities that we were dealing with. So we were faced with either constructing a toolkit with multiple different tools that would have really got away from the approach of person-centred planning. So we built a tool, and it was okay. It was okay in that it did deliver packages of support, and it did it inside the sort of planning construct about putting the person in the middle, starting with their goals and aspirations, very individualised types of support to help the person achieve those goals, help achieve the general intent of the scheme to provide support for economic and social participation and greater levels of independence. But there was no connection from the outcome of those tools, the delivery of the plans, back to the funding base. And there was no measure of the critically important measure of what would be the long-term impact of the scheme on people's lives. So we spent the last 9 months building two critical new components of our work. The first is we went back and said, how did the Productivity Commission come up with its estimate of the number of people and the cost that would be put into this scheme? And we're quite lucky in that John Walsh, who many of you would know, who was the Associate Commissioner to the Productivity Commission, is now a member of the board, and Sarah Johnson, who did all of the modelling work for the Productivity Commission, is now the scheme actuary. So I feel like we've got some pretty good expertise close at hand. And the way the Commission had built it up was using a variety of bits of data that identified people by some broad disability types. They had 24 categories, and then looked at supports in the ICF, the International Classification of Function and Disability, in those domains, the 7 domains across 5 levels of frequency, and that was used to create a indicator of general support need on a daily or more basis. And so we started with, well, what additional information might be available to people that would help us, without making it onerous for them, get a better idea of the actual support needs, so that we can try and really validate where our assessment tool is landing. And we did a big piece of work of looking at the type of tools that are available in Australia and indeed right across the world. And we've built that up. We call these the reference packages. And they're very early days and we're just testing them at the moment, piloting them, and by the middle of the year we'll be out for a wider public consultation on them. So to give you a very clear example, which would be known to many people in this room, when you think about spinal cord injury, if you know the level of the lesion and the ASIA score, are fairly good in combination with age, a fairly good predictor of support need. As we run through other disability types, there are good indicators for cerebral palsy and MS and some of the other neurological conditions. We're using the CANS indicator, which is used in New South Wales Lifetime Care and Support Scheme for brain injury. And the strength of the correlation to the funding sort of diminishes as we go down. So we're at the point of dealing with intellectual disability and some of the spectrum disorders. They're not strong correlates, but there's some additional information that we can capture. Now, the idea of this is not to turn this scheme into one that delivers support by impairment tables. It's not doing that at all, but it's setting the early indicators of a framework in which we'll collect additional information and populate that over time, start the collection of the longitudinal data. It was important for us that we, however, to avoid the perception that we were turning it into an impairment-based scheme, to also build the outcome framework. Another thing the Productivity Commission said would need to be built. I had a big list of things that needed to be done when we started, and that was another one on it. And again, we did the approach of looking internationally to see what was available. There are some reasonably good outcome tools used in disability across the world. They tend to be diagnostic or program specific and not across a whole population. So we think we might be unique in building the first outcome framework that will be used across all disability types, and we've built that, we've tested it with our advisory council and we're piloting it at the moment, and again, as soon as we tidy it up on the basis of usability, which will be by the middle of the year, we'll be coming out for a broader public consultation on that as well. The third area was trying to simplify the planning process. This was a lot of feedback we received from the participants that they didn't mind the outcome, but they found the process overly complex, and and that was a concern for me, because this is a plan that's owned by the person. It needs to be capturing what they want to achieve. And it was because the way in which we'd built up the support needs was using a catalogue of supports, and we ended up, and it was, I'm a bit annoyed with myself and really the agency we got here, because I'd said right from the start I didn't want to be in this space, but we ended up producing plans that looked a little bit like of a diary of a person's life. So it listed every episode of support and when it would be delivered, and that was not fitting the intent of the scheme to maximise the control and the choice to the individual. So we've taken that 600 odd item catalogue and we've reduced it. And from July last year, we now provide people with their plans in 3 categories. The largest component, which is for core support, which includes personal care, domestic assistance, employment, vocational, things that are enduring supports. That's delivered to the person with a value, an indication of the sort of supports that they can use it for, but it's flexible in their hands. The person can choose what they buy, when they buy it, who they purchase it from. And that's really honouring the intent of the scheme to provide that choice and control to the participant. The second category is around capacity building. So this is supports for early intervention or therapeutic interventions or goal support. Supports to help people achieve particular items, so they're time and purpose and resource limited, and they're locked for the purpose for which the funds are allocated. And the third area is around assistive technology and capital above $5,000, so home and vehicle modifications and any assistive technology over $5,000, and it's locked for the purpose for which it is allocated, not unsurprisingly. And we've got a lot of work going on to try and build a national assistive technology program.